What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, John J. II, here with David DK, runs SpartanHoops.com. David, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you're all about, and tell the people all about it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. It's David Klein, DK, and Spartan Hoops _DK on Twitter. Just a big Spartan Hoops head, a Big Ten guy for sure, and looking forward to talking a little bit of Big Ten basketball, maybe a little MSU focus today. So,
Yes, sir. We're ready to get right into it. Talk about some MSU basketball. We're going into March. We've talked about it on the podcast for weeks. Our focus has been on March for a long time, and it always has been, even since the first tip-off. Really, your focus is on March towards that end of the season tournament, the big dance. And this MSU team especially, you know, they've dealt with some ups and downs. Obviously, the tragedy that happened on campus, devastating, really took the whole campus and all the whole community by storm, alumni alike. David's actually a fellow Spartan alumni like myself, so, you know, Spartans unite, right? So it's good to have him here. But how did that, I guess let's just talk about that first. How do you think that impacted the basketball program just because it was so unexpected? And I guess what happened with that and how did the team react? How do you think the team reacted?
yeah, I think that obviously from a community standpoint, just an absolute tragedy, just devastating, senseless act of violence, and still feeling the lingering effects with some of the students still in the hospital, injured from it, some in not great condition. So it's obviously ongoing. It's an epidemic in this country, and we ended up falling victim to something that happens all over the country almost on a weekly basis. So really hit home on this one. I have to imagine that it was extremely difficult to think about basketball during that. They obviously don't have a game against Minnesota during the week. That would have been a couple days after the fact. And then they have to go on the road in a rivalry game that just kind of, it's been such a heated and vitriol rivalry for a while. And it's hard to imagine the emotions that are tied in wanting to beat your rival after going through that. They obviously fall a little bit short in the last 2 minutes, unfortunately. And then they have to kind of put some of this together, and they have a really nice bounce back against Indiana, and then we ride the roller coaster kind of up and down. But I think that the teams handled it well. I think it's brought them closer, and I think generally, they've kind of rallied around the Spartan community and trying to give them, at least for a couple hours every time they play, a little something to talk about and just kind of feel that united community while they're playing. So can't even imagine the emotions shortly thereafter, and still probably some of the lingering effects of just having to have gone through that when you're 18 to 22.
Yeah, you really can't explain or put into words what they're going through exactly on campus, and have to go out and play basketball. After something like that happens, obviously Tom Izzo's taken by storm by it and really devastated, speaking in the following days after the tragedy happened. And I remember, the days running through East Lansing, it's just like a safe haven. It's almost like I remember the days just going to the bars or, going to a party, whatever it was. And maybe you can attest to this too, but it's like nothing bad can happen here. We're all among friends. We're all students here. And it's almost like you're immune somewhat to the outside world. I don't know if you felt that way at all, but it was just kind of
100%. Yeah. It's it's a second home now for me. I still feel that way every time I go back, and I agree with you. When I was there, you're just in like a sub reality. You're going to school and you're figuring it out, but like 80% of your time is free, and you're partying and you're making friends, and it's a special place. And to have somebody violate that, it's just astounding. But it's honestly just a fact of life that it's happening all over the place, and so easy to just scroll past and say, oh, there's another shooting, but this time, it hits right home for us. So, it's trying to make me be a little bit more aware just of how much of a problem this really is. So, taking some steps, both, with the government and politics, that's not really where my, strong suit lies by any measure, but it does feel like change has to happen because this is just, it's so incessant. It just constantly happens in this country. So,
Yeah, it's sad how numb we've became to it, and it's just if it hits close to home, it just brings into the forefront. We don't live in a bubble. Just because it happens close to home doesn't mean it doesn't happen everywhere. We see it in the news all the time, and it's something that's very prevalent, has to be fixed at the source. But switching back to MSU basketball, let's talk about, so obviously, and I just want to speak on all the teams that were so good in showing their support to, Spartan Nation, MSU, and even Michigan. Michigan, that they really stepped up in my eyes. And it's not that I didn't expect them to do that, but just seeing them do it, seeing the maize and blue in the Crisler Center wearing Spartan Strong T-shirts and it's on the Jumbotron, that just shows you that it's bigger than basketball, and bigger than the rivalry. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And we've seen it all across the Big Ten. We've seen it even abroad, outside the Big Ten as well. So it was a great outpour of support to the Spartan family, and I was just really happy to see that. But looking at that loss against Michigan, I saw the bookies had Michigan -2. I'm like, okay, yeah, they're in the Crisler Center. It's not going to be a big deal. This could be a sneaky lock to pick the Spartans. Obviously blew them out in the first run. I guess going back, digging up some history, what happened in that Michigan game that stood out to you, which allowed Michigan to win?
I think that it's been a little bit of an issue for this team to close on the road against a quality team, and we saw it against Illinois. I know Malik Hall went down in that game, but there's long stretches that they had to play without him this season, so I don't know if that's necessarily a fair excuse, even though it happened, like 8 minutes remaining in the second half. So they collapsed there. We saw against Rutgers, a gross, grindy game, at Madison Square Garden, a chance to be able to come out with a win, and they collapsed down that stretch. And then, we've seen it in some spots too. The Indiana game, also they're up double digits in the second half, and they are not able to close that one out. So I think a little bit of it was this kind of who this team has been. Unfortunately, this season they haven't 100% been able to completely close a game on the road. So we saw a little bit of that, and I think obviously the effects of just the week and the toil of it. It felt like they were in it, and then it was almost like they ran out of gas, and that was it. They gave it all they could. Kobe Buffkin hits that kind of step back, sidestep prayer with the shot clock winding down with 2 minutes left. I thought that was really the dagger. Michigan State had to respond with a bucket. They don't. I think Hunter Dickinson hits a three the next one.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of spiraled out, and they just didn't have anything left in the tank. So, I think it's a combination of both. Maybe some of what happened, and then also this team hasn't shown the ability to be able to close on the road until really last night. And I don't think Nebraska's a quality team, but they won 4 in a row before that, and they beat Maryland, they beat Wisconsin. So that's, they were playing better. It was senior night and in a big crowd. Tominga's parents came in from Japan. He obviously has a really good performance for long stretches. So I think it was an important thing for them to get over that hurdle, because there'd been so many games in a row where they collapsed on the road, and this time they found a way to win. I think for their psyche, it was extremely important, especially after the Iowa game, goes the way that it does. So
don't get me started on the Iowa game. Jeez, oh Pete. I guess let's dive into it real quick. So obviously you take the last minute, 40 seconds, 40 seconds left on the clock, right? I mean, I don't even have to do a play-by-play. You know what happened. It was just a devastating display of defense, immaculate display of three-point shooting from the Iowa offense. I mean, is there a better comeback than that against Michigan State that we can look at historically?
No, I think there's obviously worse losses, and I saw some takes, that this is the worst loss in Michigan State history. There's way worse losses than that. The MTSU game, with the way that team was playing and they were built, that's clearly probably number one. The Syracuse game, I was in the building for that one. That whole season just was kind of it was just mucked up with the OTL report and all the rest of that. That team was under so much pressure, and you just thought if they could get past that, maybe they could carry something on and find a little magic, because it was such a talented team. So there's definitely worse losses, but in terms of just like devastating comebacks, I that's got to be right up there. That's for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially with the time that they had it to do it in.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It's
you
just
just thought
nuts.
like maybe they were turning a bit of a corner. They play really well against a team that's, I thought they lost a couple, but they've played, reasonably well. And we just saw what they did on the road at Assembly Hall, absolutely just waxed Indiana. So I think that they are one of the better, top 3, 4 teams in this conference right now. And to have been able to come out with a win there, I think really would have been just nice for seeding purposes, for the Big Ten tourney seeding purposes. And they just weren't able to get it done. So I guess I'm not altogether unsurprised the way that they come out against Nebraska, given the weight of that loss and the mental hurdle you have to overcome after something like that happens to you. I think I have to imagine that locker room was just dead silent, like just like guys looking around saying, "What the fuck happened?" Like we made almost all our free throws, we really didn't turn it over that much, down the stretch there, and they just they stunned you. So. I think, again, I don't know if you can 100% trust this team. They're going to have to show it. They got to obviously take care of business against Ohio State on Saturday. And then you have the Big Ten tournament. We'll see where they end up falling in the seeding, but find a way to make the semifinals, find a way to make the finals in that. And, string 2, 3 games together and show us that you can actually do it in March. And maybe I'll start believing a little bit more. But this team's equally capable of going out and losing that first game and equally capable of making it to the finals and potentially win the Big Ten tournament. And you could probably say that about 7 or 8 teams in the conference right now. And that's just kind of where it is. It's a muddled mid-tier Big Ten for me right now.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point too, and you see Indiana beat Purdue. You see what Purdue had the capability of doing. Kind of throw February out of the conversation just because before that, I don't think anybody could touch Purdue if they wanted to. And then you come into February, you see them take some bad losses. And it's just
Chinks in the armor coming for sure.
Yeah, and it's just the Big Ten is wide open. The Big Ten is completely wide open because anyone can beat anyone. We've seen it happen. So that's going to make a really interesting tournament, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, if Michigan State closes on 2 possessions, they could be in first. So they play that Minnesota game. Obviously, that wasn't in the cards. But you play that Minnesota game, that's a win. Like, that's just a win in my book. They're not losing that at home. If you found a way to close against Purdue at home and you beat Iowa on the road, we could be talking about Michigan State getting a piece of the Big Ten championship. And that's how thin the margin of error has been, I think, in the Big Ten this year. And especially for this team, just they're not good enough. They're not deep enough to be able to overcome these small margins in games. And maybe that turns now, but got to show it to me to believe it. So.
Yeah, you definitely do. And that's one thing this team does have. They might not have the size that teams in the past have had. They might not have the skill, the shooting ability, or the clutchness. That's something that's big that I haven't seen in this Michigan State team this year is the clutchness. But something this team does have is the grit. And Tom Izzo has alluded to that. Where does that grit and how far does that grit get you, both in the Big Ten tournament and in the Big Dance come March?
Yeah, so, NCAA tournament aside, I think that that's just so matchup dependent. Can you find yourself on a 7 line instead of the 8-9? Can you avoid a 1 seed? I think you'd really like to do that, giving yourself a little bit better path if somehow you can win 2 games. But it's a scenario where they're going to have to probably beat 2 very good teams in the tournament, and they've got to show the ability. As long as there's not a dominant post player, I like Michigan State matching up with just about anybody. There's a couple teams I'd circle that I absolutely do not want to see. Baylor's probably one of those just because the guard play is so good. They don't have a dominant post player, but I think they have some of the best backcourt in the entire country. Arizona would be a nightmare matchup with their front court. They shoot the 3 well. Like that's a pretty scary team. Kansas has obviously played extremely well for the most part this season. Bill Self losing 60% of his scoring from last year and still finding a way to be as good as they have been, I think is a testament to just how good of a coach he is. So, there's probably 3 or 4 teams that I absolutely do not want to see. But outside of that, if they don't have a dominant big man, I don't think there's too many teams that want to see Michigan State the way that they've been shooting the 3 the last few games in the tournament either. So I guess we'll see about that. For the Big Ten tournament, again, I think if you can avoid Purdue's side of the bracket, I still don't want to see Purdue. I know they're a little vulnerable now. I just think it's a bad matchup. Edie's an awful matchup for us. Really, outside of them and maybe I think an Iowa matchup would scare me a little bit, and Indiana is still, I think, one of the better teams in the conference. But ultimately, if you can avoid Purdue until the finals matchup, I think that they have a shot against any of those teams on a neutral. I don't anticipate that the spread would be much more than 3 points either way of anybody that they're going to see kind of the rest of the way in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, you look at Purdue. You look at the first matchup State had with Purdue, though. I mean, that came down to one shot. You're outsized. You're missing a lot of shots. Edie's setting records against you, and it comes down to one shot. Kind of reminded me of that Gonzaga game in the beginning of the season, where it came down to one shot, and it's just you'd like to at least win one of those two games with a buzzer beater. And I think in teams past we could see that. Something that comes to mind is the Corey Lucius 3 in the March Madness tournament. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah, of course.
They're playing. I think So
Maryland.
Yeah, Maryland. That's right. It was a Big Ten. I don't think they were Big Ten at that time, but it would have soon been a Big Ten matchup. But a huge win, and the clutchness. It's just like you like to see that, or even the Kenny Goins against Duke. The stuff like that. That's what I think of when I think of Spartan basketball, and I haven't seen that this year. But that doesn't say that's the Spartan basketball mentality, the IZZO mentality, isn't being shown through this team. I think it's just being shown in a different light. And something that I've talked about for years, I can't really think of a true leader of the team since Cassius Winston for Michigan State. Is it A.J. Hoggard? I don't know if he's completely undertaken that role as the team leader. I know that IZZO has the vision for him to be the team leader, but it seems like Tyson Walker and A.J. Hoggard might have somewhat of a power struggle there. I don't think it's anything intentional, but I can see that they're both somewhat of catalysts to the entire team when they're on the floor. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think that AJ's matured from where he was last year, but I think he still has a ways to go. I think that he lets his emotions get into the game, and when he harnesses those, that's a very good thing because he can play in passion. But I also think that when things don't go exactly his way in the start of games, they can kind of spiral. We've seen it in multiple occasions, really the last 3-4 games where he's turning the ball over, 3-4 times in the first 10 minutes of the game, and the entire team's getting discombobulated. It's really hard to have a difficult start when the head of the snake is not playing well right from the get-go. So I think that he needs to do a little bit better job of controlling his emotions in spots. And hold on one second, I'm sorry. Quiet. Dog's whining to go out, so forgive me for that. I could hear it in the background. But anyways, so I think he's got to do a little bit better, and I agree with you that the idea of him assuming that role, I think, would be natural given the position that he plays. Has he 100% taken it? No, I don't think so yet, and that's something that's still a work in progress. But he's running out of time. He's an upperclassman now, in my opinion. He's heading towards his senior year. He really needs to just capture it and become the guy that we all know he has the capability of doing it. We've seen the flashes this year, the Penn State game, the second half again against Nebraska, 14 assists in that game. Hasn't been done since Mateen Cleaves in 2000. Like, there's a very good player in there. It's controlling his emotions and his body language when he's on the court and leading by example. So I'd like to see a little bit more of it, in these next 2-3 games, whatever they get in the Big Ten tournament and this Ohio State one before the tournament starts, because they need him. And then you're speaking about the clutch gene, and I think if you're looking at one guy who kind of has had it, I think Hauser's had it in some spots, but I mean Tyson Walker, some of those buckets that he hit in the Iowa with the clock winding down to 2-1, and he's pulling up and knocking down shots. We saw it in that Nebraska game in the corner. Kind of sealed it with that fadeaway that was just a step inside the three-point line. He's shown the ability to be a big shot kind of guy. He's kind of begun to maybe look a little bit like Travis Trice to me. Some other people brought it up, and I think that that's an apt comparison where Trice just kind of got in a mode down the stretch and put Michigan State on their back and carried them to that Final Four in 2015. Can Tyson have that kind of magical run? I think that's what he's been dreaming about since he started playing at Northeastern. That's why he transferred to Michigan State, to put himself in a position to be able to go on a run in March. And I think it's a situation where the guard play, especially with Akins heating up the way that he has been, can compete with any team in the country. It's just a matter of all those guys getting going on the same page. We saw that in the second half to almost perfection against Nebraska. Need to see that more down the stretch to really feel comfortable heading into March.
Yeah, very well said. And exactly right. I can definitely see the Travis Trice. I can see a lot of his attributes displayed through Tyson Walker. And it's just something that I can really notice and I can see game in, game out. You see Tyson Walker put the entire team on his back when they need him to, and that's very important because they need a player, if not multiple players, that they can count on in clutch moments to be able to score points, to be able to be relaxed, to be able to drive to the hole and get fouled, not be afraid of contact. And also, if you get to the line and get fouled, you got to go to the line and make those free throws. So there's a lot of aspects of that clutchness that you can look back at previous teams and see, okay, I'm seeing a little bit of this in this guy, or I'm seeing a little bit of that in that guy. So it's really important to see that, and it's very much needed. IZZO looks for those types of things. Those are somewhat, you could even argue those are intangibles, that there's something you can't really explain, you can't coach it, you can't teach it. It's just kind of something you're born with, and you got to be able to handle the heat in the trying moments, because that's when games are won and lost. So let me ask you this question. I got 3 categories in mind. Who on the Michigan State team, the current team right now, going into March after everything we've seen, who is the playing well, needs to keep the pedal to the metal, who is not doing good enough, maybe needs to pick it up, and I guess who needs to, or who has been the most improved? I guess out of those 3 categories, who would you put in those respective categories?
Yeah, I think that I just named all 3 of them. I think it's the backcourt. To me, it's Tyson Walker's the guy that's got to be pedal to the metal. I think at this point, you pretty much know what you're going to get out of Joey Hauser, which is, it's like 16 and 8 almost every night, and that's just who he's evolved to. He's been pretty steady. He's kind of been the guy that's carried this team in spots when the offense is really stagnated. We saw it in that first half. If he doesn't hit a couple of those threes, Michigan State's down 20 at half. So he's been so steady. I would say Tyson's the guy. You have to continue to pedal the metal. I think he's really the upside of the roster, because when he gets cooking, he's as good a guard as almost anywhere in the country. The second guy that's got to pick it up a little bit is got to be AJ for me, because this team goes as he goes. There's no three-point shooting unless he's getting deep into the paint and he's spraying the ball around the perimeter. So he's the guy to me that I'm circling and saying, I need more. We've seen it in flashes. We got to see it consistently down the stretch in March. Otherwise, this team is going to fall on its face. And the guy who I think's been most improved is Jaden Akins. The last 2 games, back-to-back career highs. He had 21 and then he had 19. That's the 2 highest outputs, scoring production he's had in his career. He's a guy that's just started getting hot. He's shooting the snot out of the ball from deep. Like, he's the guy that you're looking at and like, okay, if Tyson gets going and AJ's struggling, maybe it's a scenario where Akins can kind of pick up some of that slack and carry him over a couple of these humps until AJ gets locked in. So it's the 3 guards. That's going to be the determination of how good this is going to go in March, and they need to be as good as they've been the last couple games, and AJ a little bit better for Michigan State to come out and win something in March.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with all those categories, all those players you put in them. Let's talk about Malik Hall. So he's coming off the bench. He's doing great things. He's battling injury. How will that affect him going into March? Is that going to be a liability, or do you think that he can manage that injury, continue to play well, continue to see a lot of minutes off the bench, put points up, come in clutch, maybe pick up some of that slack that AJ or Tyson might be making on the court? What does Malik Hall need to do to stay healthy and to be an asset to this Michigan State team come March?
Yeah, I think he's got to hit the boards a little bit harder right now. When he first came back, he had a decent game against Iowa, and then the next couple he really didn't score, but he grabbed a bunch of boards, and I thought he was active defensively. Now he's kind of started putting the ball in the hole a little bit more, but he hasn't been quite as good on the glass. I'd like to see him continue to do that because this team needs it. I think that the front court has had some issues down the stretch. Part of the reason why they lost that Iowa game is they gave up 6 offensive rebounds the last 4 minutes. If the front court just secures one of those, it probably goes our way. So, I think that he's got to be better on the glass. But he came in, he hit a couple big threes in the Nebraska game. They lean on him a little bit to be some of the low post scoring that's really not on the roster outside of him and Jackson Kohler. So he needs to continue to be able to punish mismatches when he has them. And I think he's just got to continue to play a little steady. It looks to me like he's still lost a little bit of his explosiveness after the multiple injuries that he's had during the course of the season. He hasn't really found a complete rhythm. But now he's played 5-6 games since he's come back. There's really no, in my opinion, excuse. The health excuse can only be taken so far. He's got to lock in mentally, be better on the glass, be a leader of this team off the bench because this team doesn't have any depth. It really doesn't. It's him, and then it's a couple guys in the center rotation, and you're stealing a couple minutes with Holloman in the game. When AJ's got to hit the bench. So the bench is really him. And so he's got to be as his best version of himself for Michigan State to kind of carry it in some games when they need a bucket here or there, or they need a defensive stop and a glass clean. He's got to lock in for Michigan State to be at their best.
Yeah, you're not lying when you talk about Malik being the bench. He is the bench. He is the only player off the bench really making an impact on the outcome of the game. So I mean, we've seen Michigan State. We've seen them do such great things. We know they're capable of it. I want to talk about Mady Sissoko. So I feel like, and I saw a glimpse of it last night with that big jam that he had underneath. And it was a commanding jam. It was a dunk where it's like, okay, I'm the big man on the floor. I'm really the only big man on this team that's seen some serious minutes. But I still feel like he hasn't broken out of his shell and claimed his, like an Adrian Payne, say, okay, I'm the big man. I am the only big man on this team, even if there's others that might come off the bench and give me a breather time and again. But I want to see him break through that threshold and say, I am the big man. I'm going to command that position. Even if I'm not the biggest man on the floor or the biggest center in the Big Ten, I want to be able to, really show my team and everybody else that I am the big man and really accept that role. What does he have to do to accept that role and show that to the people more?
Yeah, I think the Indiana game was a good indication. I can't remember how many rebounds he ended with. I think it was only 2 or 3, and he's had too many of those games where if you're playing 20 minutes and you're the center spot, you need to have at least 6 or 7 boards. But I thought his energy level was really good. That play where he dived on the floor, kind of pumped up the crowd. That's more of what he does. He had that block where he just smashed it in that guy's face, and Renault was on the baseline and caught it and went out of bounds. Like, he just needs to have some type of impact on the game, more so on the defensive side and then on the glass. We saw in the Nebraska game him kind of just hop all over the boards. So I think it's just his energy level. It continues to need to be good. That's obviously the weakest part of this team is the center rotation. And it's not going to be perfect. I think we're far beyond that at this point in the season, but it has to be good enough. And to me, that's more on the defensive side. It's more making an impact on the glass on both sides. If you can just get some decent rebounding from that spot, and it's not a complete hole defensively, a block here and there, that's what the spot basically needs to give the guards a chance to be able to win games in March. So for me, it's continuing to bring the energy and playing within himself for the most part, catching it and finishing it when he's around the rim, and just playing solid defense and ensuring that he's trying to get his hands on every single ball on the glass.
Yeah, all very important things, and they're going to be very much needed come March because IZZO needs a big man out there. His offense runs smoothly with a big man out there that knows he's the big man, that knows he's the center on the floor and on the team. He represents the team from the center position, so he has to know that. And I think IZZO is working day in, day out to make sure he knows that because he needs him to feel that way if they want to win big games against big teams. So it's just it's really imperative that he does that. So I hope that they do, and I hope they move forward with that mentality. And I hope they play like they did in that second half of that Nebraska game going forward, because I don't know who can beat them if they play like that. It's just commanding, really fluent offense, solid defense, moving your feet up and down. You can't get any better than that. I don't know. All right, David, before we sign off, I want to have you allow you to have the floor. Tell the people about the community that you provide content to. Tell us about your website. Tell us about everything you do for Spartan Hoops. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, man. So it's SpartanHoops.com. You can check it out. I try to write as many articles as possible a week. It's been more like once a week, but I try to write bigger picture stuff. Do some advanced, stat analysis stuff through Ken Palm, Bart Torvik, some of that. Just kind of look at some of the numbers, break down some of the film, and kind of see where they're at. But just trying to keep a pulse on the team, so you can check it out there. And then again, it's SpartanHoops_DK on Twitter. Just generally tweeting about Michigan State, putting some film out there, and then post game we always try to do some Twitter Spaces and stuff. So it's a great way to interact with the community. Everybody still just absolutely loves Michigan State basketball. There's a bunch of die-hard, passionate sickos just like myself. So it's been nice to be part of it, and I appreciate everybody's continued support with the content.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Last question I have for you. Well, actually, second to last. Are you a sports betting guy at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've taken a little break right before March. I usually do like the last 2 weeks where I'm keeping an eye on as many games around as many conferences as I can. But this is the time where I kind of lay low, and then March hits, and then it's just a free for all. So I usually try to get in a couple different things. There's like a little sports betting thing I do with my buddy, where basically you start with a set amount of money. Is put $50 in, you get like $1,000 to gamble with. And you just pick as many games as you want during the course of it. Whoever has the most money at the end of it wins. So usually a decent pot, and we've come close a couple years. We were right in striking distance. We decided to gamble it all for first place a couple years back and ended up losing. But it's a lot of fun. So it's my favorite time of the year, bar none. And I just pray that the Spartans, let us make it to the second weekend this year and just give us a little bit more to talk about and enjoy as this magical time of the season comes upon us.
I always compare it to the Christmas season. When March comes along, it's very comparable to the Christmas season. Just it feels like the holidays are in motion, in full swing, and it's just an exciting time. You got games on at random times. Nothing but college basketball floods your TV. Pretty much, multiple channels at once. You're playing different games, even if it's a team like Oral Roberts is playing, or St. Peter's, teams that have only coined themselves through the March Madness tournament. Seeing those types of teams play and even beat really good teams, 1, 2, 3 seeds. I mean, that's fun. That's March Madness right there in a nutshell, and that's why we love it so much. So it's just a beautiful time of the year.
It is. It really is. So it's been tough the last couple of years for Spartan fans. It's always tough, but win or lose, it's my favorite time. It's the best sporting event, I think, in the world. It doesn't even come close to me for anything else. So the upsets, like you said, in the magical part of the season, and then just grinding out, and let's hope that the Spartans can go on a little run and, like I said, make it a little bit more enjoyable this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will see, and we got another run at it. That's all I'm happy about, is we got another run at it. And I think, it's especially with that win against Nebraska, I guess, were we ever in contention to say, oh, we're on the bubble, we're the first 4 out, or was that ever in the conversation, or, what would have brought that?
No, I don't think it was this year. I
Okay.
think that you lose that game and you probably have to sweat a little bit. You needed one of the last two. I think that they're firmly in now. That has sealed it. And so we could have talked about the bubble had we lost that game, but we really never had to talk about it. I think the one thing that this team has shown, and maybe the scheduling ended up helping, I think the scheduling was brutal this year, particularly in the conference again for this team. But I think the one thing that you could say is in the games that they absolutely needed to win to stop them on, a 2-game losing streak turning into 3, were games like Maryland at home, Iowa at home. They won at Penn State on the road. Like there's a couple games that they really needed to have in kind of desperate moments, and the team found a way to win those. And I think if there's one thing that you can kind of take hope with, even with some of the road losses, is that when they've absolutely needed one to put themselves in a more comfortable spot for the season, they found a way to win. And now they just have to do that. Now you have to do it because you win or you go home basically after this. So that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. That's where we love to be. That's where this Michigan State team, hopefully, we've seen it in teams past in Michigan State's history, where they thrive on that type of environment. And that's what we need to see out of this team. Even improbable teams have made it deep, Elite Eight, Final Four. So, honestly, any team that's being coached under Tom Izzo, I think they have a great chance to make a deep run come March. So, I'm looking forward to it, man. It's coming up. We're within weeks at this point. Less than that. Weeks. Yeah, I guess that's accurate.
Election Sundays. It's only a week away, baby.
That's true. Here. That's true. It's a beautiful thing. All right. That brings us to the end of the show. DK, you got any final thoughts, final words for the people out there to leave them with?
No, baby. Just go green. Take care of business against Ohio State Saturday, and let's string together a couple wins of the Big Ten tournament and have some fun.
Yes, sir. Go white. All right, guys, that brings us to the end. Make sure to check us out on social media. Check out our link tree. It's going to be at the bottom of this podcast in the description. Check out our website, ginsportsnetwork.com, for all of our articles, IG posts, and updates. And make sure to check out DK, David Klein, on Twitter. And I'll put his handle up here on the screen again, at Spartan Hoops _DK. And check him out on his website, SpartanHoops.com, for all your MSU content regarding the college basketball scene. Tom Izzo's team. It's January, February, Izzo, April. Just keep that in mind. Don't ever forget that. Okay, everybody, it goes to everybody out there. So we're looking forward to the month of March, and we're looking forward to the Big Ten tournament first. We'll be sure to keep you guys updated throughout all of it. But for now, I'll leave it at that. I'm John J. II with DK for the Gin College Podcast. Have a great night.